Hey YouTube, it's Chuck. Good morning. I've got another video that I have been putting off making. I did a presentation at the Jacksonville Beekeepers Association a few weeks ago and teased this subject at the end of the presentation here with a discussion about pollen. I'm going to bring you along with an experiment I'm running, and this experiment is about the identification of pollens throughout the year. Now, many of us kind of know the oranges and the yellows, and we can watch our bees on some of our local flora, and we can actually see the pollen baskets on the bees' legs and pretty easily identify where a pollen source comes from. But this time of year in Jacksonville, we're in mid-October right now, there's a very dark pollen that comes in. And I have a sneaking suspicion this comes from the golden rain tree, which is in full bloom here right now, but I have yet to prove it. I've been looking on some flowers to try to catch bees gathering nectar and seeing if they've got dark brown pollen in their pollen baskets. And I think I've gotten a little bit of footage, but I'm going to show you scientifically how I'm verifying that the dark pollen in my pollen trap is coming from the golden rain tree. So come along with me and I'll show you how I do it. Okay, so this hive has a pollen trap on it. It's a bottom entrance pollen trap, and the door goes up and down so I can control whether or not the bees have to go through the little cones that peel the pollen off her legs or not. But the tray comes out from the back. And let me just show you what I've got in here. This is straight out of the hive, but if you notice, there's some very dark pollens in here, and they only happen this time of year. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few of these pollen grains that they have been collecting, the very darkest ones are the ones I suspect, and I'm going to look at them under a microscope. And I'm going to show you what the pollen grains look like under a microscope, because every pollen grain is somewhat unique. You can use it as a specific identifier. Some are fuzzy, some are round, some are oval, different shapes for each pollen grain. So I can actually, through magnification, validate that this pollen that's coming into my trap matches what I might find on a local blossom, which will bring the two together. So in order to do that, I'm just going to kind of show you here. I've got in my pocket just a little tray here, and I'm going to grab just a few of these grains of the very darkest pollen here, using tweezers just to kind of keep my fingers off of them. Now obviously these pollen grains are in here together, and there could be a little bit of side contamination, but more than likely when I look at this underneath a microscope, I'm going to be able to definitively know what the grain that I pulled out is looking like down to the individual grain level. So I'm just getting the very darkest ones because this is what I'm absolutely fascinated by, is these really, really dark brown pollens. Okay, there's 4, let me get one more. Okay, so now I've got a couple of grains, and I'll show you how I put them on a slide and into the microscope to take a look at what these grains look like. So I'm out here in the field, and I'm near a golden rain tree that has been blooming for a few weeks, starting to get some seed pods. I just want to kind of show you what the blossom looks like, and I'm going to take some of the flowers off of this plant and take them back in order to extract the pollen, but also want to show you a few of the bees that are working these blossoms. If you notice, the seed pods are red and the flowers are yellow, and the higher up you go in the tree, kind of the earlier the blossoms are. A couple of bees working them. Okay, so as part of this pollen mystery here, I'm going to show you a little bit of how I'm making these slides so that I can look at them underneath a microscope. So first, what I'm going to show you, and I've got some slides here, and I've got some glass just to cover them with if the substrate isn't too thick. So first, I'm going to actually take the flower. So this is the blossom of the rain tree, and the anthers, which is the part where the pollen comes from, is in the very, very tips of these. Maybe I can show you a macro picture here zoomed in. The very tips of the anthers have the pollen. So if the bees are going to this flower, they're collecting it from the anthers and they're bringing it back and putting it into my hive and possibly getting entrapped in the trap. So what I want to do is take a look at the pollen that is coming off of these anthers and to see if I can find something in my pollen trap that's similar. So all I need to do is grab a few of these flowers that have nice anthers still on them. You know, obviously after a flower gets pollinated, the anthers can kind of drop off. And I'm just going to try to scrape the anthers of a few of these in here so that the slide has some pollen. I tell you what, these are very tiny anthers. For a bee to collect a full pollen basket full of pollen from one of these flowers, can't even imagine how many different flowers they might need to go visit. But let me just continue to grab a couple here. So far, it looks like I got 5 or 6 anthers on there. Every single one of these anthers should have hundreds of pollen granules on it, but I'm not going to take the opportunity to miss a little bit. Now, this is an optional thing. Obviously, a little bit of water sometimes helps the glass kind of stay on here. It gives a little bit of a surface tension sort of a thing. So now I've got a slide with some anthers from the rain tree for me to identify what the pollen granules look like on that blossom. So now I've got another slide here, and if you remember, we went to the apiary and I grabbed some of these pollen granules. What I did is I grabbed the darkest ones I could find that are these mystery granules that I'm a little bit curious about. And I grabbed 4. And the reason I grabbed 4 is to just kind of give my experiment a little bit of a better chance in case there are 2 black pollens out there. You know, what if these are all from similar but different plants? So here I've got 4 different sections, 4 different pollen baskets, and I'm just going to add a little bit of water to kind of create a half a drop of a bubble on each of these to kind of help them stay in their area. And I've got them separated enough on this slide so there should be no cross-contamination. If there is cross-contamination, I'll probably be able to see it when I look under the microscope. So I'm just going to kind of give each of these a little bit of a mash to kind of make that pollen break up a little bit so that it's not all clumped together. Try to use different parts of the stick to avoid cross-contamination too much. Theoretically, these look like they're all from the same flower, but you know, I can't really tell. Now, I need to soak up a little bit of that water because I got a little bit too much. So in each of these, I'm just going to use a little bit of paper towel, different section, grab a little bit of that. Okay, so now this slide has got pollen from 4 different pollen baskets from the bees that dropped them off. So theoretically, what I'm looking for is the pollen granules on the flower to match one of these pollen that I pulled out of my trap, if my theory is true that this dark pollen that the bees are bringing in are coming from the golden rain tree. If I can't find a match, then I need to go find another flower to get the pollen from to see where these dark pollens are coming from. And even if these don't match, I may go back in and grab some of the lighter browns or something like that, because I'm pretty sure, looking at those anthers, that this is the dark pollen that's coming in. Okay, so that's how I made the slides. Let's take a look. So what I've got here is a 2000x microscope that can do different scales from 4, 10, 40, 100, and then have some ocular eyepieces that basically magnify that all the way up to 2000x. For pollen granules, it seems like about 800x is the perfect magnification to get a good perspective and size of the gray molecules. So basically, I just take the slides we've got and I focus them all the way down until I get a nice clear image. And then once I focus them, I can actually just take the iPhone and use right here on top of the eyepiece to get the pictures, and I'll show you a few of those. But that's basically what I'm doing here with the microscope. And underneath the slides, guess what I found? So here is the rain tree at 800x that I finally used to determine what the grains off of the rain tree look like. And I generalized them that they kind of look like coffee beans a little bit, kind of in the shape of a football, nothing little. They're smooth on the edges and fairly consistent. If you look here, I'm taking another rain tree. So I identified this one as blossom number 2. And it's also, you know, if you notice, a little bit different lighting, and I didn't zoom in the same, but they're very coffee bean shaped pollen grains with the same kind of center crease, kind of reminding me of little footballs also. Here's another one at a little bit lower magnification. I didn't write down the magnification on this one, but I think this is down near the 400x range. And you can see, again, how they are shaped and dispersed. And what you're looking at in this picture is the edge of a large pollen grain. That big black section over to the right is actually the blob of the pollen grain I pulled out of the trap. And then I kind of had to flake a little off to the edges to where I can see the individual grains down at this level. Here's another one, changing the lighting to where I'm kind of looking through them a little bit more. The lighting changed. I'm sharing all this with you just to kind of enjoy the beauty of what pollen grains look like at the level where you can break them apart. And pollen grains are pretty much unique for each flower. Now, I don't want to say it's fingerprint unique because obviously there are different perturbations, but the general size and shape and identification of them are unique. And within each plant species, obviously you could have variation, and inside of those variations, pollen grains could change a little bit. But I think the looking at these pictures just kind of shows you that these are all consistent. I do want to take a look at this one here, and this is a different magnification, and I pulled this out just to show you that there's contamination in here. Do you see the pollen grain in the very center? And I'll probably put an arrow here so you can see it, of this group of golden rain tree granules. It's round and has little kind of rough edges on it. That's just to show you that some pollen, from another granule perhaps in my pollen trap was adjacent to this, or my tweezers weren't completely clean and you got a few other grains in there. But there's no mistaking that grain is different than the ones we're looking at. So what did I learn here? I think I learned that I identified the dark brown pollen grains that came out of the pollen trap and matched them to some local rain tree blossoms that I found in the area, which positively identified, at least for my unscientific satisfaction, that the grains coming from the rain tree matched the darker grains that I pulled out of my pollen trap. So you could use this microscopy technique to identify any pollen grain. You just have to match a flower that you think it's coming from with the grain that you think they brought into the hive. I wouldn't probably pull them off of the bees. I'd probably go into a pollen trap or maybe grab one off the landing board. But there's a lot of fascinating colors in the pollens. And I love sharing them this time of year. When we were talking at the Jacksonville Beekeepers Association, some other beekeepers were mentioning the whites and some of the dark oranges and the browns. But one thing is true. The fall pollen that comes in Jacksonville in this time of year sure does have fall colors in it, doesn't it? Well, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Just a little bit of a technique to match pollen grains to something to help solve the mystery about where it might be coming from. I enjoyed it. I'm probably going to continue to do this at home a little bit more to kind of solve some of these mysteries as they come up. Leave comments below. Let me know what you think about this subject. We'll talk to you next time.